Good evening. I have never looked at that ceiling that long. This is a beautiful building, isn't it? What the Champaign Park District and community have here is truly a treasure. It's historic. Just think of all the incredible performances that have passed through this building, all the legendary artists that have come through Champaign-Urbana because of the Virginia Theater. Tonight, we're going to tell you how Harold "Red" Grange, our very own galloping ghost, came to the Virginia Theater. We'll talk with his college coach, Robert Zupke. George Halas, owner of the Chicago Bears and founder of the National Football League. He'll tell us how Grange transformed college and professional football forever. And we'll meet businessman Charlie Pyle. Charlie Pyle came to Champaign-Urbana in 1920. He eventually owned the Virginia Theater and another Champaign movie house, and Charlie Pyle had his office right here in this building. In 1923, Charlie Pyle met Harold Grange, an aspiring football player and student athlete. Charlie Pyle was a combination of impresario, visionary, and gambler. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm Virginia Theater welcome to Mr. Charlie Pyle.
Thank you.
Welcome. Charlie, welcome to the Virginia Theater. I want to know how you first became involved with this place.
Well, actually, it was my idea to build the Virginia Theater. I believe that Champaign-Urbana needed a quality theater, just like the ones in the big bad cities. So I organized a stock company, got the financing together, and built this beautiful theater. The Fox Theater in St. Louis, and Atlanta, and Detroit also designed the Virginia Theater.
How did she get her name, Charlie?
Oh, a local contractor by the name of A.W. Stuhlman named it after his daughter, the Virginia. So I've been lovely to have a chance to be here and operate and own this beautiful theater.
What other kinds of projects was Charlie Pyle involved with?
Besides being a sports agent for Red Grange and also for French tennis star Susan Lingland, I organized the first professional tennis tour, and we toured America and Canada as well. I also organized the first transcontinental foot race. We'd take them hoofers and we'd run them from Los Angeles to New York and then back again. It was called the Bunyan Derby. These things had various amounts of success.
Well, and that was actually made famous when Tony Award winner Michael Christopher wrote a play called C.C. Pyle and the Bunyan Derby. It was actually directed by Paul Newman. It was a play. All right, Charlie, tell me how you met Harold "Red" Grange.
It was in the fall of 1923. Red Grange was with his fraternity buddies from Zeta Phi, and they come down to the theater often and were regular patrons. We solidified our relationship in 1924 after that big game against Michigan, which propelled Red Grange to the forefront of American college football. I want it said, I never had a signed contract to be Red Grange's agent while he was in college. We had a verbal agreement that he would be my, player after he finished his college career. And there was a big scandal about that, but after many talks with President David Kinlan, George Huff, and Bob Zupke, we were exonerated.
Now, the NFL was a fledgling league, Charlie. They had maybe 5,000 or 10,000 people at these games. What I want to know is how you thought professional football would be able to pay Red what he was worth.
Well, I think it's quite simple. The National Football League needed fresh new talent that only American college football could provide. And I knew the league was becoming more successful. They were developing franchises in major cities, and they were regulating the games better. So I knew the league would be a success. And I knew they had to have Red Grange. And I knew they would pay him. Now, coaches like Bob Zupke didn't like the professionals come in and stealing their players. So they started organizing leagues like the Big Ten and building bigger stadiums, but the lure of being a professional, they just couldn't compete with that.
Well, Charlie, we eventually got indoor stadiums, right? We had multi-million-dollar contracts. 100,000 plus would watch the games live, and of course, millions on television. You were right. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Pyle at the Virginia Theater. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you for having me, Paul. It's very fun evening.
It's great to have you. Thank you. Charlie Pyle. Our next guest that I'm honored to introduce was the head football coach at Illinois for 5 presidents of the United States, 1913 to 1941. Would you please welcome the legendary Robert Zupke. Coach, great to have you. Welcome to the Virginia Theater.
Well, thank you for asking me to be part of your celebration. I do love this theater.
Coach, tell me why you think Red Grange was so special.
There has never been another player exactly like Red Grange. He had an uncanny ability to perform at maximum effort on call. He performed the best when the stakes was the highest. He was a modest, humble young man, came from a home of very little means, worked in high school just to help provide for his family. As a player, he always gave his teammates all the credit for his success. He especially praised his linemen for opening up the holes for him to run through. Red liked to escape from the pressures of his success, and he would often come here to the Virginia with his friends. My greatest regret, when it comes to Red, is that he never finished his college degree.
We'll talk a little bit about some of your teams during the Grange years.
Our teams in 23 and 24, very fast. Every member of the starting backfield was sprinters. All 3 lads could break 10 seconds in the 100-yard dash, and they were great blockers, too. We had depth at every position.
What about some of Red Grange's remarkable performances?
In 19 and 24, we played at the University of Chicago. Chicago pounded us early, led 21-0. But in the second half, Red scored 3 touchdowns and had a 4th score called back by a questionable penalty. Red was magnificent in every aspect of the game that day. He gave it all, so much so that on the way back to the locker room, he fainted from sheer fatigue.
What about his senior year, 1925? What were some of the high points?
Although Red was a senior that year, we lost many quality players to graduation, and we started out 1-3. Then we played Penn, the reigning power of the East, at Franklin Field. The sports writers of the Eastern Press had a field day tearing us down, even stating that Red was vastly overrated and would be handled by these Penn Quakers. We broke them early and won 24-2 in the rain and on a very muddy field. Red ran wild, over, around, through these Penn players and had over 375 total yards, rushing, passing, and returning kicks. To this day, I do not think there has ever been more praise heaped upon an individual than was Harold after that Penn game. Well, he made believers out of Damon Runyon, Ring Lardner, Ford Frick, just to name a few. Grantland Rice, who was already a longtime fan, wrote a poem about Red for the national newspapers. Then, in his final Illinois game against Ohio State, Red led us with over 200 total yards, a fitting end to a great college career.
Is it true that after that last game at Ohio State, it was a long press conference, and then you, Coach Zupke, essentially kidnapped Red and took him on a taxi ride for an hour and a half?
Yeah, I had a long talk with Red, and I told him I thought he should finish his degree and pursue a business career. I told him that professional football was just this outlaw type of football with just not enough rules. And I warned him against his dealing with a man like Charlie Pyle, a suspect character. The type of man who would take advantage of a young, inexperienced, naive college man. Red said he believed Charlie to be honorable and had his best interest at heart, and he really thought they were going to make a lot of money. I couldn't change his mind. But if he had to turn pro, I am glad that he signed with the Bears. At least then he would be playing for my former players, George Hallis and Joey Sternman, and I knew them both to be honorable men. Let me be clear about one thing. Even though we had our differences, I loved Red Grange. There would never be another like him. He was a humble, honest young man and a gifted athlete. Truly, this galloping ghost was something special. During his 3 seasons at Illinois, 23 to 25, we were 19-4 with 1 tie. Red accounted for 31 of our 50 touchdowns, rushing and passing, an incredible number. He was an amazing athlete. No, an amazing man.
Coach Zupke, an honor having you here at the Virginia Theater. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Zupke. Thank you, sir. A pleasure. And now would you welcome a University of Illinois grad, a civil engineer as a matter of fact. He was MVP of the Rose Bowl for Robert Zupke's team, owner of the Chicago Bears, founder of the National Football League, George Hallis. Coach, thank you. Coach Hallis, we've enjoyed talking some Illinois memories and talking Red Grange tonight. I guess what I want to ask you, Coach, is how could the addition of one player change the Chicago Bears in the 1920s the way it did?
Well, Red was a very special athlete and running back, but more importantly, he was a great leader, commanding almost instant respect from the Chicago Bear teammates. Everyone who was interested in sports or football knew about number 77, and every kid wanted that number on the back of his jersey.
Coach Hallis, what was your perception of C.C. Pyle? Some called him Cash and Carry Pyle.
Charlie Pyle was a very interesting fellow with a questionable reputation. But to be honest, while we were dealing with him, he was always seemed to be on the up and up. He was tough, he was determined, and he was always bargaining for the best deal for himself in Red. Pyle turned out to be a very honorable gentleman.
I want to go ahead, sir.
Yes, our first contract settled on a 50-50 split of the gate, with our club paying the travel expenses. There was also a minimum guarantee for a Red of $10,000 a game, plus a $100,000 guarantee for the season. Most guys in that time were earning $100, $150 a game, but Red commanded those numbers, and the team respected because of his leadership. I mean, reputation, demeanor, and amazing ability.
All right, let's fast forward to that very first game. After he signed the contract with you, do you remember any of the details of Red's first game with the Bears?
Wrigley Field was a madhouse. We crammed 36,000 fans into the stadium, and there were hundreds more outside the park trying to get into the stadium. You know, Red had a kind of nondescript effort, but he saved the game against the Chicago Cardinals with a pass interception in the end zone to preserve a 0-0 tie. The fans went wild onto the street, onto the field, and trying to get to Grange, but he managed to escape and get into the locker room. What a day. He changed the face and perception of our product, professional football.
How about some other Red Grange early NFL stories?
The New York Giants were a new franchise in the NFL with owner Tim Myra about $35,000 in debt. And 73,000 people jammed into that park in New York to see Grange and the Bears with a gross of over $142,000. But they've split that with us and saved the Giants from folding. You know, we played too many games in those years. We only had 23 players. I think one time we even played the trainer. But everybody wanted to see number 77 in action, and so we gave him the opportunity. You know, Red hurt himself in 1926, playing in that other league piles. And worse, he played on that damaged knee all season. And in 1928, he spent most of that year on crutches. We invited him to rejoin the Bears in 29. We wanted him back because of his character and ability to lead on and off the field. Red was an unselfish player and allowed me to attract other great talent like Minnesota's version of the Paul Bunyan, Bronco Nagurski. Red was the ultimate team player, and his great leadership took us to 3 championships in 32, 33, and 34.
Coach Hallis, in your final analysis, what more can you say about Red Grange?
Well, you know, I've been fortunate to be a coach for many years in the NFL, own the Chicago Bears franchise, and I've been close to very many great NFL players, but there'll always be a special part in my heart for Red Grange, who contributed above all other individuals to the sport, college and professional football, arguably making it one of the most, if not the most popular sport in the nation. You know, and Charlie Pyle, one of the visionaries that brought us this building here, well, he was the catalyst that brought Red Grange to the American sports fans.
Ladies and gentlemen, Papa Bear Hallis. George Hallis, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Coach. And now, ladies and gentlemen, what a great honor it is to welcome back to the Virginia, arguably the greatest football player of all time. Would you please welcome Harold Red Grange. Thank you. Welcome to the Virginia. Thank you.
Isn't this place beautiful? Just as I remember it. You know, I spent many a relaxing hour out there watching movies. I really enjoyed this evening. It was great to see and hear from Coach Hallis and Coach Zupke. You know, this is where I met Charlie.
We've talked a lot about Charlie Pyle, Red, and you probably knew him best. What was Charlie Pyle really like?
Well, he was a hard man to describe. He was a gambler, a risk taker, had a vision for the future of sports and entertainment, and as far as I'm concerned, a quality person. Because of the way he dressed and his lifestyle, he appealed to me as a young college person. We had a really good friendship from 1923 to 1930, and I'll never speak ill of Charlie. He gave me an opportunity for more fame and fortune than any young person could ever dream.
Red, tell us what life was like for you before college.
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania. My mother died when I was 5, and my father eventually moved my 2 sisters and brother to Wheaton, Illinois, where he had family. He became a peace officer and constable. Dad found it difficult without Mom, and so he moved my sisters back to Pennsylvania to live with relatives. My younger brother Garland and I stayed with Dad. We learned to keep house and cook, basically take care of ourselves. We were gifted athletically. We played basketball, baseball, football, and ran track. Father encouraged athletics, but he insisted on getting good grades in school. When I was 14, I started my first job carrying ice for the princely sum of $30 a week. It really helped my strength and endurance. I think it helped me in all my sports.
Well, for those that don't know, at Wheaton High School, Red Grange scored 75 touchdowns, had 82 extra points, 523 total points in 4 years, averaged 15 points a game, Red. That's incredible.
You know, I like basketball best. And thought about pursuing a professional baseball career. I dreamed of being the next Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth. I enjoyed track. In the spring of 1921 at the Illinois State Track Championships, I won the 220-yard dash and the broad jump. In the spring of 1922, I won the 100-yard dash. You know, it was at that track meet where I met Coach Zupke, and he invited me to try out for the University of Illinois football team in the fall.
Amazing. Now, I understand you had an interesting beginning to your Illinois football career. Is that true?
Yes. When I got to the field, there were over 100 people trying out. I went back to the Zeta Psi house where my brothers quizzed me about why I wasn't at tryouts. It was strongly suggested, with the influence of several swats of the fraternity hickory paddle, that I return to the practice field, which I did. The next day, I was in line to draw a uniform. I was the 77th guy in line, and they assigned me number 77. I had no idea it would become so famous. We had a great freshman team. We almost beat the varsity in a scrimmage.
Let's fast forward. You weren't eligible freshman year, sophomore year. Do you remember how you felt sophomore year, first varsity game?
I was so nervous I couldn't keep my breakfast down. But once I touched the ball and several tackles, all the nerves disappeared. We won the game 24-7. I had 3 touchdowns. We went undefeated in that year. We were 8-0 with 3 shutouts. Jim McMillan and I were both chosen as Walter Camp All-Americans that year.
Everybody wants to always know about Michigan, 1924, Red Grange. Tell us about the first quarter.
Well, we started the year with 2 victories, and Michigan won their first 2. Now we were playing for the big game against Michigan. It was also the dedication of the new Memorial Stadium, which was dedicated to the fallen World War I University of Illinois alumni soldiers. Michigan kicked off to us. I was standing at the 5-yard line, and I looked down the field, and I saw 3 Illini form a wall and take out the first line of Wolverine defenders. I ran several yards to the right, and the next group of Illini took out the next defenders. I cut sharply to the left, and right after the 50-yard line, I broke into the clear, and I raced down the east sideline, thinking all the time, I can't get caught. I just can't. The crowd was cheering as I crossed the goal line. The next few minutes were like a dream, as I scored 3 more touchdowns. In a span of 12 minutes, I scored on runs of 95, 67, 56, and 44 yards. We just destroyed Michigan. They were a whipped team at halftime. Final score, 39-14, much to the absolute and utter amazement of the sport reporting world. It was a madhouse after the game. In fact, it was so crowded they had to give me a little place over in the corner where I could get dressed. There were so many reporters. After the game, several of us walked back to the fraternity house, changed clothes, caught a bus downtown, had dinner at a quiet cafe, and came here to the Virginia Theater to watch a movie.
What a day. I want to talk about your decision to turn pro. Tell me about that.
Our last game of the season was against Ohio State before the largest crowd ever in a conference game. Over 85,000 fans jammed Buckeye Stadium. We pulled off a close one and had a decent day. The press conference afterwards to announce my professional football plans was crazy. All the reporters, really everybody, was curious to see who I was going to sign with. Chicago Bears, New York Giants, or somebody else.
You signed with the Bears. All of a sudden, you had some money. Tell me what Red Grange did with his newfound wealth.
Almost immediately after signing that contract, I bought a raccoon coat. $500. It was the Range of the 1920s. I bought 2 new automobiles and a house for my father and my brother. Money flowed out of my pockets as quickly as it came in, which I regretted later.
Now, after the contract expired, you and Charlie Pyle left the Bears and you went to start a new league. Tell me how that worked out.
Well, that was an unfortunate set of events, and I even suffered a major leg injury. And the league itself, well, it failed. Charlie and I headed west to Hollywood to make movies, none of which were Oscar material. I was still in demand, so there were plenty of speaking appearances and special guest appearances. And just before the Depression, I borrowed money for some investments that eventually went bad, and I got myself in a pretty big financial mess. It was not the best years of my life. It was embarrassing and demeaning.
But tell me now, when you went back to the Bears, it was 1929, Red Grange back to the Chicago Bears, no more agents this time.
I had to learn new skills to make myself the complete player that Coach Hallis wanted. Never again was I going to have a contract or an agent. Only a handshake for $1,000 a game or whatever the gate receipts would allow.
And in spite of your bad knee, you still led the Bears in scoring in 1931 and 1932.
In 1933, our share for winning the National League Championship was $210.34. A little bit different from what the NFL pays out today.
That's true, Red. All right, tell us about your final year with the Chicago Bears. It was 1934.
This was arguably not only the best Bear team ever, but, in my judgment, the best NFL team in history. We brought on a new running back named Beatty Featherman, who became the first halfback to rush for over 1,000 yards in a single season. We were the first NFL team to go undefeated, untied in a season, 13-0-0, scoring 286 points and only allowing 86 points. That 1934, that team was the best team I was ever associated with. But right up there with the 1923 national champion Fighting Illini.
All right, absolutely. Great team. Red, talk about your life after football.
Well, first, I was an assistant coach for the Bears. I worked for WGN Radio doing color commentary for Bear broadcasts. I was a commentator for weekly highlight shows and eventually did college games on TV. Speaking engagements were plentiful at coaching clinics, high schools, and colleges. I became a sales manager for a water and soft drink distributor in Chicago. One of my proudest business achievements was forming an insurance agency right about the start of 1934. I gained more work doing broadcasting for TV and radio, but the best moment of my life was when I met and married my wife, Margaret. The best mate a man could expect. Muggs was my pal and manager. Because of her help and assistance, we were able to recoup most of the money I lost in my youth and during the Depression. I retired in 1964. We live in Central Florida. My life has been a great ride. And looking back, well, I wouldn't change a thing.
Red, it's been an honor talking with you.
My life has been very fortunate, and I thank you for your kind words this evening.
Now, before you get away, I want to say a few more things about you. Like in 1951, how you were selected to the very first college player to be inducted into the College Hall of Fame in New York, along with your college coach, Robert Zupke. 1963, you were the first professional player, along with your professional coach, George Hallis, to be inducted into the very first class of the Professional Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. 2009, you were selected the all-time greatest college player by votes in colleges across the country by ABC and ESPN. In addition, you've been selected on many all 20th century teams throughout the years. Most recently, in 2011, you were selected as the #1 icon of all time for all sports in the Big Ten Conference by the Big Ten Network. And finally, to sum up your life and accomplishments, remarks by your close personal friend and broadcast partner of many years, Lindsey Nelson. In his autobiography wrote, and I quote, He was the most modest hero I ever knew. I tried to learn all I could about from him, how one charts a course without controversy and furor when cast into the glare of the public spotlight. No one ever did it more becomingly than Red. Of all the broadcasters with whom I worked, Red Grange left the greatest imprint. I hope that I learned a lot about him from him, about how to maintain proper values in a world of mounting egos. Red's calm and always polite demeanor were really quite impressive. That's from Lindsey Nelson. Ladies and gentlemen, Red Grange. Thank you, sir. A streak of fire, a breath of flame, eluding all who reach and clutch. A great ghost thrown in the game that rival hands may never touch. A rubber-bounding, blasting soul whose destination is the goal. Red Grange of Illinois. There are shapes now moving, two ghosts that drift and glide. Which of them to tackle, each rival must decide. They shift with spectral swiftness across the thwarted range. One of them's a shadow, and one of them is Grange. Few men may seize a phantom who drifts above the chart, but even spectral phantoms must at least have a start. Men reach to find both missing, but this is not so strange. When one of them is a shadow, and one of them is Grange.